Welcome to Breaking the Ice. I'm your host, Avery Lightfoot, and today we are going to do a deep dive into what it means to be a fan. I'm here today with Dr. Larena Hoeber. She is an associate dean and professor here at the U of R, and she specializes in the field of sport management, sport and recreation management. Larena has won multiple awards in the last decade recognizing her contributions to the academic field of sport and recreation management. Welcome, Larena.
Thanks. I'm glad to be here.
So happy you're here as well. We're just going to get right into it.
Sure.
So memorabilia, like our jerseys today, are very important to fans. So can you tell me about the story that goes along with your jersey today?
Sure. So this is the jersey. So I'm not a hockey fan. I'm not. But when Regina and Saskatoon hosted the World Juniors in I think it was about 2010, this is the jersey that was designed for them. So it's got the green, and it's very controversial because all the other World Junior hockey jerseys have obviously the red, and I was very excited about that, and it was something that I asked my mom to get for us for Christmas. And again, I love it because it stands out, because you can sort of tell I'm from Saskatchewan, and I actually wore it. I went to the 2010 Winter Olympics, and everyone else is in red, and I wore this. Totally stood out, and I remember a number of people stopping me going, "You got to be from Saskatchewan." And so that was kind of cool to kind of mix both the Saskatchewan and the Canada with the jersey. So it's not one that I wear very often, but I really love it.
Oh, that's super cool. Because I think Saskatchewan has such a unique identity compared to the other provinces and territories in Canada. And it's weird because I know probably the other provinces think the same of theirs, but I think Saskatchewan has just a different type of pride in their sports and their hockey and their football and everything like that. So that's really cool that you're able to even just wear that years later and at Olympics, which is completely different sporting environment than Saskatchewan World Juniors hockey.
Right.
So I think that's awesome. Yeah, I think relating to yours, green is the color. So I'm wearing my dad's Saskatchewan Roughriders jersey, and talking about the uniqueness of it, this is the new design for the Riders, and I know it was kind of, I don't know, not controversial because there's a lot of meaning behind it, but it wasn't really known that they were going to do a new merch drop, and so this is just it sticks out. It sticks out when you're at a game, even though you've got the retro jerseys. Yes. But yeah, definitely something that sticks out and is very different from the other football teams.
Yeah. That is part of the fandom part of, I might be jumping ahead, but part of that is the identification. So you can easily tell because you've got the logo and it's sort of the same color, but there is also a fun part sometimes of being a fan of being a little bit different. And sometimes it's like a slightly different color or a new jersey or things like that, that you have both of those things going on in fandom at the same time.
Oh, that's super cool. I just to ask a little bit more about that, thinking about more traditional Rider fans. I don't know if they would be entirely open to a new jersey. Is there something different with the different generations of fans in general that a new era is coming on?
Well, I think I'm going to say yes and no. I think part of the merchandise and the memorabilia is recognizing there's lots of different types of fans. So there may be the ones that are very traditional. They don't want you to mess with the logo or the color or the cut, which may be a bit more of an older generation to some degree. But we are seeing more commonly lots of teams having the home and the away, and then there's a third jersey. So it's not that uncommon. And it's much more common, I think, these days to update them regularly, where you probably had a time 20, 30 years ago, it was the same. You did not change it. So you kind of have both going on of I think there's also the part too of some fans are just give me a new jersey every year. I want to buy a new jersey every year to kind of keep up and be contemporary. So you've kind of got a variation there that goes on. Yeah.
Hey, that's super cool. And, just speaking about the evolution of fans, can you tell me or describe what the current state of being a fan is. Explain fandom today.
Sure. Fandom today, I think, again, there's a lot of things that are probably still the same. It's like this idea of an allegiance to a sport, a team, an athlete. It's that sense of loyalty. It's a sense of community. But I think there's a bit of a contemporariness today of, it doesn't always mean you have to have season tickets. You can watch it at home. You can stream it. I think there's a sense of being a fan of multiple different teams. Again, historically, it probably was, this is my home team. It's where I live. It's where I grew up. But now with technology, like I can be a fan of Australian rules football if I want. I can be of cricket. So I think the reach is a lot greater, and you can also hold on to it longer if you move and you still have that connection with that. So I think there's a lot of things that are exactly the same, of that you watch, you consume, you're loyal, but I think there is a lot more option to either open up who you're a fan of, but also retain it longer in some cases too.
I love that because, as somebody who's in Saskatchewan, and it's hard to travel to any sporting event, especially out of the province, because it's expensive or it's cold most of the time. So we can't necessarily get to the games that we want. So I think it's really cool that we're able to sustain that. And you don't have to be there in the arena or in the rink to be able to feel attached to a sports team. It's
so again, media absolutely helps us with that we've got so much more reach in order to do that, whether it's again new fandom or connecting or maintaining it with an old part of fandom that you have. Yeah,
I love that. So where do you see yourself in the world of fans? I guess maybe comment a little bit about hockey and maybe elaborate into other sports.
Sure. So I think hockey's probably where I started being a fan, and that comes from a bit of my generation. There wasn't a lot on TV, so all we watched was hockey. There wasn't maybe there was CFL, so I did become a fan of the Riders because I'm from Saskatchewan, so that was an obvious one. But I kind of grew out of hockey. I have two younger brothers, and they introduced me to basketball, and very much now a basketball fan. Of the Raptors. I also was of the Grizzlies. I lived in Vancouver for a while and would sit up in the nosebleed seats because that's all I could afford. But when they left, I kind of stopped following them. But after I finished my PhD and I came back here, I got season tickets for the Riders and have been a season ticket holder for 20 some years and kind of just love that part. It's like, it's a connection to where I'm from that I really enjoy. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. That sounds super cool. And it's nice to hear that your fan experience has evolved over the years too, and it's you've been brought in by different people into the different fan communities, which is really interesting. And so, I guess that plays into how a fan community is created. Really, can you describe a little bit maybe different ways that fans get brought in?
Yeah, I think the traditional way was often through family, and I would say it was often through fathers. Fathers being the more typical sport fan, connecting that, watching it with their children, again, typically sons. But what we see now is a lot more variations of it could be again, hierarchical, like it could be grandmothers or moms introducing children to this, but it can also go sort of a parallel, like it could be friends or spouses, or like in my case, it wasn't my parents at all, it was my brothers. And then I would say that I think my husband was interested in sport, but I think I pushed a lot of it with him. But we also see things now too of I think parents being more open to if their kids are interested in something different, kind of getting introduced to it through their children, who might be interested in something else, like soccer, for example, has not historically been a popular thing, but kids are more involved in soccer. They might have soccer teams that they follow. So then it gets their parents involved in that way. So there's lots of different ways to create that community, but it is often, you kind of have to be brought in by someone else. Generally, not exclusively, but generally it is. It's that socialization through friends and family and different generations like that.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, because I can definitely relate to that. When you're talking about the grandparents and your parents socializing you, and definitely say baseball. I know you're a Toronto Blue Jays fan.
I am also, yeah.
And so
I'm going to say part-time. Part-time. Yeah.
It's a lot. They got a lot of games,
Yep.
a lot of stuff happening in the off season.
Depends on how good they are.
Yep.
I am definitely a fickle baseball fan.
But yeah, so my grandma's a big fan. She's been a fan since the Montreal Expos.
Oh, yeah.
So,
yeah.
And yeah, so she's even talked about the unfortunate event of the Major League being suspended when there was going to be the Expos and the Blue Jays that were going to be in the final.
The strike.
So she watches the Blue Jays every game, records them, and so when I'm there, and especially being a baseball and softball athlete, just that connection with my grandma has been really nice, and it's always something that we can chat about. Even one of my other grandparents, they started watching the Blue Jays a little bit more religiously as well.
Yeah.
And just something to do. And she would call up my mom and be like, don't tell me what the score is on the Blue Jay game or whatever it may be. So
it's a nice way of connecting, I think, with some people, of having that common thing that you can do and watch and talk about. So it's a nice thing to have that. Yeah.
It's awesome. And it's really cool to see how that not only happens within households or friend environments, but also just at the game with strangers too.
Yeah.
I know we talked about earlier and plenty of times, just that connection to an identity without a true connection to a person. It's almost like a fan identity, like Hockey Canada, like Team Canada connection. Yeah. Whatever that may be. Even just high-fiving strangers like you've experienced before. Is there what does that bring you, or what do you think it brings fans in general, just that connection with the strangers?
Well, I think it's that idea a little bit of it is an unspoken. It's like you don't have to know their name, you don't have to, but you can immediately see like, oh, they're wearing the same jersey as me, or they sit around me, and like you can all collectively be excited about something, which I really do love. I think the unfortunate part is like it's not long lasting. It's not like they now become your best friend, but in the moment, it's really a nice way to connect with strangers. And I don't know if I remember sharing this with you in class before, but when the Rough Riders won the Grey Cup, I remember going down on Albert Street outside. I think my husband wasn't there at the time because he was in Newfoundland, and I just remember walking down Albert Street and just like, again, high-fiving people, random people, and it was just like, it's just joy. You get to connect in that joy with other people, and it's such a cool experience that there's very few other places where that actually happens in some ways. So I love that part.
Oh, that sounds amazing. I've seen lots of people, I think around hockey too, with the Winnipeg Jets and their whiteout, their whiteout playoffs tradition, and they're in the street watching. Or I think I've seen some media in Vancouver where they're in the streets and watching. Yeah,
like those public park viewings, and the Oilers had it last year.
Which is just really cool because it brings people, like if you can't be in the stadium, you can still be a part of it and be physically close to the stadium as well. So I think that's really cool. I was thinking, while you were talking, I was thinking too about the expectations of fans and, like the levels of fans, like do I have to prove that I'm a fan through the actions, the stuff I wear? So I wondering if you could comment on that.
Sure. Yeah, I think fandom is an interesting. It exists on a continuum. It really does, in some ways. Of like you kind of are introduced to it, and you kind of have a little bit of interest in it. You probably have limited knowledge, like of the skills, the history, the players, the team. And then it kind of moves on to a point where you're like heavily invested in it. And that's consumption, that is loyalty, it's not missing some things. So in that sense of proving, I think if you want to move up the continuum, you kind of do have to prove it again of like, do you know the players' names? Do you know like some of the terms that are associated with it? Can you talk about some of the history? Like, are you wearing the right stuff? But I think you still can be a fan at kind of at that very introductory level, but you're probably not going to be as connected with other people as when you are like you're a regular attendee or you're a part of a digital like forum or you've got the gear. So again, like you can, but you're probably not going to get the same allegiances or kind of the connection with other people.
Okay. Yeah, because I was thinking about my expertise is also not in hockey. I've got a lot of other sport experience, but even just thinking about me waking up for super early in the morning for the Olympics, watching or the Paralympics, watching Team Canada from wheelchair basketball compete. I think I woke up at 2:30, 3 in the morning
that's what you do
to watch it, and that's the first time I've ever done that for any sport, which was tiring, but definitely worth it to watch. It was valuable to me, and so it's interesting to see those different levels of fandom. Is there anything that maybe takes it to an extreme, or is there anything leading up that would be extreme fandom that might turn a little bit negative?
Oh, absolutely. And again, I think there's two kinds. So what we might see are the situations, for example, of people really getting involved in gambling. So their fandom connects to gambling, then it gets very destructive in that, and they're spending a lot of money on it. But we can also see examples a lot in Europe, but not exclusively, of things like hooliganisms or ultras. So where the loyalty is so intense, it's almost like a gang. And it's very violent and aggressive and intentionally against other people, of fans of other teams. So we see that less here. It can still happen. We can still have riots. We can still have fights between fans, but I think there is the extreme levels of almost the hatred. I can't even appreciate someone who's a fan of another team. I just immediately you're the worst, and it could be again physically violent or things like that. So it can get out of hand.
Yep. That does sound kind of crazy. I think there was some riots in Vancouver quite a few years ago. I remember seeing that all over the news and going, okay, it's not supposed to happen in Canada.
No, but it's not. Yeah. But I think it's that sense that it's because your identity is so tied with it, and then they lost. It's just a difficult thing to deal with, and it also contributes to the idea of the mob mentality that maybe you don't intentionally do it, but then everyone else is do it, and then you get caught up in it. And so it doesn't happen all the time, but it can, just because of that intensity of how much either joy you might feel. So you can also have riots after you win. But also that losing, it hurts, and it hurts immediately. And so we kind of have to let off that steam, unfortunately, in some bad ways.
No, that's definitely unfortunate, but there's still that passion, which is super admirable in a lot of people with if they're passionate about anything. But it's unfortunate that it turns a little bit more violent. But with their identity so closely tied to fandom, or having that integrated as part of themselves, can you comment on maybe how that happens, or how that gets attached to a person's identity, and they're either proud or they have to defend it?
How does that happen? That's a good question. I think it happens just over time. And again, it doesn't happen with everyone. And again, that also exists on a continuum where some people, it is very personal, and you can see it sometimes with people who they constantly are wearing branded clothing, or they would never miss a game for anything, for a wedding, a funeral, nothing like that. And I think those are sometimes situations where it does become a bit I don't want to say problematic, but you lose sight of what does it really mean. I know one of the things that I think I learned from one of my younger brothers was I would always get frustrated about some things, and he would just be it's just a game. Don't let it get to you. But I know how it does. It becomes your team, or it becomes your player, and you kind of feel your identity and your self-worth is tied up with that. So again, some people, it is very, very strong, and it's really hard to disassociate yourself and kind of go it'll be okay. But sometimes it can be really kind of hurtful in a way of it overtakes your life and your identity.
Oh, I can definitely feel that. I don't think I've had, sport take over my life as a fan necessarily. But knowing that, Manitoba and Saskatchewan have quite a few rivalries, but especially in the CFL. I know playing softball with the university team here, we had quite a few people from Manitoba. And so whenever we were driving home on a Sunday from Calgary, and there would be a game on, probably was like the Labor Day Classic
Yeah,
or the
for
Banjo
sure would.
Bowl or
Yeah.
whatever it may be. But they're always like, they were cheering for Manitoba, and they would like text the chat and be like, the Bombers are up now. And so I think that's really it was fun. But I'm also like, I'm still not cheering for the Bombers. Like,
No, and I
still
think it's hard. I think
Yeah.
we just do. We kind of. It is difficult to put ourselves into someone else's place. It's no different than, like the Four Nations Cup that was on, and that you could see the divide between the Americans and the Canadians, and even these players are on the same. They play on the same team, but yet you get so invested in it, and it's hard. Like, I think that there was a bit of a social media series of like saying 3 nice things to the Canadian players about the U.S. and they couldn't say anything.
Yeah.
And the same thing happened with the Finns and the Swedes, and even though again, like they know each other, they're friends, but we kind of adopt that idea of like, I can't say anything bad about my place, my team, and I cannot like your team. Like, it just, I don't know. It's a weird thing that we do with that.
Yeah, it definitely is super weird. And I remember hearing about like fights breaking out within the first like 10 seconds of the
there was
game.
3 fights.
Like, there was 3 fights, and it was super quick. And to be expected, I feel that there's always with hockey, especially just Canada, US,
Heightened tensions.
it's a lot. But yeah, it was just super cool to watch. I guess the next question I have for you is kind of goes along with people coming back to a team, especially after an unsuccessful season, knowing that, like with the Riders, like we've been consistently not doing as well. Obviously, we had a better season than we've had in a couple years this past year, but with the Winnipeg Jets or with Toronto Maple Leafs or like the Edmonton Oilers, like they did their playoff run. They were in the Stanley Cup final last year, but just kind of, what is that it factor that maybe brings people back to a team whereas maybe some other teams, they lose their fans, they have to either shut down the team or relocate to try to rebuild that fan base?
I think in some ways it's some of its history. So things like the Toronto Maple Leafs, again, haven't had a long history. They've had success. It was a long time ago, but they had tremendous success. I think so. Some of it is that sense of legacy and history, and they probably won't lose the hardcore fans. But then there are other places like Arizona, I think was the one that you had mentioned as well too, in chatting with me before, that they haven't had the same history. So I think it takes a long time to get, like the it factor is almost like you have to have the hardcore-ish fans that are willing to see teams through thick and thin. They're there, either it's because it's part of their identity or it's entertainment. Like I would say, the Riders are part of my identity, but I'm also like, I go to have fun. Like, it doesn't matter. But there will be people, I think, that are probably sort of in the middle of the spectrum that at some point they're going to give up because they really they want the wins. They want them to get the Stanley Cup or the Grey Cup. But I think there's lots of other people. It's like, it's just part of this is what I do. And or the same thing like going to like Blue Jays games. It's like, it's just what I do on a Sunday. Like, I like that. But some of it could also be related to things like its costs. I know that there's people, like for the Riders and for other places, that if they're not doing well, service is not great, they're not having a good experience, and it costs a lot, they'll walk away. And that's where we're at now with a lot of sport, is fandom's expensive. So like, I can afford to keep my season tickets, not everyone can.
Yeah, which is definitely difficult, because I would love at some point in my life to be a season ticket holder for any sport. It doesn't have to be necessarily hockey, football, whatever it may be. So I think it would be really cool just to build that tradition of going to weekly games or bi-weekly games and having that connection. But it is definitely expensive.
Yes,
when you look, even with the early bird, it doesn't seem very.
Most of it's not cheap.
Which really segues really nicely into the next topic, which, because I know a lot of your research has been done in diversity, equity, and inclusion, and financial barriers is a big thing for fans to participate. If you want to elaborate on that a little bit more, or if you want to just bring up some other barriers that fans might face when trying to participate in sport.
Well, again, cost is a big part of it, although I think you can still be a fan and you don't have to be rich. You don't have to have a lot of money. Because again, you can watch it. A lot of it isn't. You don't have to have streaming, or it could be a cheaper package to watch it. So you don't always have to go in person. Although I would say going in person is more fun. I love it. I love the energy and the excitement. But even things like jerseys cost a lot of money. Merchandise costs a lot of money. I think a lot of the other barriers are a little bit more hidden in that sense of not feeling included with other people. So again, a lot of that has to do with women being questioned about why you're there, or your motivations, or do you like, again, proving yourself. And that can happen also with BIPOC community. Again, like for example, hockey being a fairly white sport and the fandom's still white, is that we do also know, like you can love hockey, but if you stand out, it's uncomfortable. So that's part of it. So if someone is Black and wanting to go to like an Oilers game, of course they can. Like if they can afford it, they can go. But you kind of look around and go, there isn't anyone else that looks like me. So whether that is someone, who's BIPOC, LGBTQ, has a disability, some of that is just, it's not, I don't think it's an intentional barrier, but it's not necessarily a sense of you feel like, oh, I have a community. I've got other people that look like me. There's often sort of a sense of a bit of a questioning that happens of like, why are you here? Because you don't look like everyone else. So I think those are some of the other barriers that exist.
No, I can definitely feel that too. Just like, identifying as a woman, and like I'm very aware of my surroundings and looking at people and their body language and what their expressions are like. And so I'm definitely guilty of like walking around and thinking that people are staring at me because I look different and not supposed to be in that environment, which is definitely a big challenge for anybody. Especially people of color, if they're not the normal body, the normalized body. And I think this would be very interesting to talk about, maybe, or get your opinion on, about the PWHL. And since that's like professional women's hockey league, they did the similar starting point as the NHL did. They had their 6 inaugural teams, 3 in Canada, 3 in the US. And it's women's hockey, which is super duper cool. So do you think there would be any changes or adaptations to those barriers potentially, or any changes maybe we'll see in the PWHL that might try to differentiate itself from the NHL?
Yeah, I think obviously cost is one already, but I think that's part of them being new. It'll be interesting to see as they become more popular. Does that then become sort of I don't want to say it, but a natural barrier that it becomes more expensive? But right now I know like you can go to games, you can easily buy tickets, they're not outrageous in terms of going. So I think that's one way that they are differentiating themselves. But again, it could be the tyranny of like, if they actually get good, that unfortunately may happen. And again, I'm not sure that I know specifically, but I think that they are somewhat similar to the WNBA in the sense of the community is like, there's a lot of women and could be moms with daughters, or girls hockey teams going, but also a lot of like lesbian women are going with their partners because they sort of feel like, I'm not going. There's not going to be questions. People aren't going to look at me. So I don't know if that was intentional by the the PWHL, but it is a sense of like there's a lot more community to that, of feeling like it's okay. It is also welcoming to men as well too. So I think there's that. But again, it'll be interesting to see over time if they do mimic a little bit of like the WNBA, who's a lot more vocal about social issues, social justice, being more open about supporting pride or disability or the Black community or some of those things. It'll be interesting to see if that happens, or if they're a bit more conservative like the NHL in that way.
No, that's definitely interesting. And just thinking about, I guess, like the way sport has the intersection between sport and gender and sexual orientation. Do you think that, like, going in, if you and like lesbian partners or they're married, same-sex couples married, and going to a women's sport game as fans, do you think that would be maybe a little bit more accepted or welcomed compared to more of a male-dominated space.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. And it doesn't mean that gay men don't go to NFL games or Major League Baseball. But I think because it's been so normalized as heterosexual, male-dominated, it is, and maybe in today's age, it's not as noticeable. But I do think, again, unfortunately, hockey's one of the ones that is, again, tends to be a little bit more conservative, that it hasn't always been the most open and welcoming to different groups. But I think some other sports have been and starting to get a lot, like they don't really care. They're not noticing that. But it is interesting how women's sports, and more so, again, with the WNBA, I think probably women's soccer, things like that, have kind of been very welcoming in that way.
Yeah, which is definitely cool, just with being able to use their platform as social, to be able to be an advocate for people who don't necessarily have a voice, or to bring light to situations. And I think that from my point of view, I think it's very different than male leagues or specifically male sport environments. Just thinking about even like the women's soccer team, or the female Spain soccer team winning their FIFA World Cup, and just even like the sexual assaults, or not being inclusive of anybody in the LGBTQ family. And so, like you can just see examples within the NHL of the resistance to include rainbow tape on a hockey stick, which is interesting. Do you know if I don't even know how to ask this. Do you know if, because like since it's a little bit more conservative typically for male sports, do you think that women and female sports are trying to significantly differentiate themselves? Like, we are not this conservative league, or do you think they maybe even stepped up to the plate going, okay, these people, these leagues, they haven't done anything for really social justice, and that's part of who we are, and really making that part of their brand? Do you think they intentionally tried to do that?
I think some do. I think definitely some do. And I think part of it is to differentiate themselves, but I also think in some ways, they're stuck between a rock and a hard place a little bit of like, they can adopt that. I think a lot of owners are a lot more open to it. I think that, the management groups are, I think media groups are for some women's teams and women's leagues. But at the same time, they may be very cautious about when it comes to, if we're open about this, are we going to lose sponsorship? Are we going to lose some media contracts? Are some people not going to want to come? So they want to grow. And so you kind of have these competing demands of, if you want growth, you're going to have to open up your market to more people. Is that going to alienate some? Whereas I think for some men's leagues, it's like they don't want to lose sort of their hardcore traditional groups. Their ownership maybe isn't on board with some of those things. Whereas I think women's leagues and teams, because they're starting new, kind of can tread new ground, but they also have to be somewhat, I don't want to say cautious, but observant and aware of, maybe they'd be more intentional about their sponsors, and about marketing, about who they're going after, that those companies support it, that they're in line with it. Because there will be some companies that are not supportive, and there will be some that don't want to sponsor it if they are open to some of these DEI, social justice issues. So there may be space for them, but it may not be as much space as what we see for men's leagues and teams.
Okay, that's really cool. I never thought about the point of kind of when you're talking, especially about sponsorships and wanting maybe to retain more fans in their fan base, especially for successful leagues like the NHL. Just thinking about that, going, okay, where did that come from? Because you mentioned, like, obviously the female sports in PWHL is starting right now. It's modern day. It's 21st century. It's new, and I forget that a lot of the men's leagues and sports, their institutions are super. They've been around for a long time, so it's hard to just make an instant change or even slow change with that, because this is tradition. This has been, it's been around for a century. Like,
tradition's great because it means you continue to do it. But it is, you're right, it's difficult to change tradition because you're going to alienate some people, but you might open up to others. So there's always, it is one of the good things that they have, but it's also one of the things that can hamper their growth because of the tradition.
Yeah, exactly. No, I think that's really cool. And I think, you know, I know Jill had a question, not necessarily about, I guess not about the leagues and stuff, but around that diversity, equity, inclusion, especially for the therapeutic recreation point of view. So I know she really wants to ask that. So I'm going to throw that over to her to be able to ask you a question about it. Because I definitely think it will relate to progress and how can we include people from a TR perspective.
Perfect.
Okay, hi. Thank you so much, Larena, for being on our podcast today.
Of course.
So my question, as Avery mentioned, is the more TR focused and talking about accessibility for fans with disabilities. In particular, I was actually doing some research and I found out that like accessible clothing has become kind of more increased in its like production through Lululemon. Even back in 2023, the NFL did release some accessible clothing. So I wanted to kind of get your input if you've run into any of that kind of research in terms of how accessible clothing can help fans with disabilities maybe feel more like they're part of that sport community.
That's a really great point because I was actually thinking more of accessibility in terms of the facility and getting around and getting access. And I'm aware of accessible clothing, but I don't know that I've seen it that often. And even just the idea of clothing and that idea of what it means for fans, very limited research. There's very little about that. I think we're starting to see more of that come out, but I think that's a really great idea of, you know, designing different types of clothing that individuals can wear, whether it's easier to put on or it fits their body better. But right now, I'm going to say that I don't think that and unfortunately, I think a lot of it comes back to marketing and what it costs and what they're going to get back. So I think in some ways, until leagues see this as either it's the right thing to do or unfortunately, they're going to make money off of it, it's probably going to be a lot more one-offs, adapting it, maybe doing some specific tailoring, but I haven't seen a whole lot of that. But I think that's a really interesting area for research to go in that way. That's a great question.
Oh, definitely. Thank you so much. All right, Avery, back to you.
Thanks, Jill. I think it's definitely interesting to talk about clothing and, you know, accessible clothing doesn't necessarily have to be for people with disabilities. It can be people who are experiencing chronic illness. I know my grandpa with ALS, he, instead of losing mobility in his legs, he actually lost it in his upper body and his arms. So finding t-shirts, just normal t-shirts to be able to, so he could put on himself to alleviate some pressure from my grandma who's a caregiver. Definitely is super important. If the Blue Jays had an adaptive jersey that he could have worn, he totally would have done that. Which I think is really cool. And I think Lululemon, as Jill mentioned too, with the Olympics and Paralympics, they did a lot of marketing around the functionality of the clothing and how anybody can put on the clothing, which is really cool. So
maybe that's a point of kind of considering too that it's not, maybe that clothing isn't designed for a specific market, but maybe it opens it up for a wide range of people of kind of going like, maybe, it'd be great to have clothing instead of a jersey like this, like it buttons up so you can open it up and put it on that way instead of always having to put it over top of your head. So I think some of it is just trying to get that message to the manufacturers and to the leagues themselves of like, okay, you have to think differently about your clothing and how it can be used by a wider range of people so that they see it's worth it to actually manufacture it.
Yeah, exactly. Because there's definitely the baby boomer population, like they are a big group of people. And so even just, designing clothing for them, that would be accessible to them as fans too.
Right,
and that opens it up to the disability community as well, which is awesome. We've talked a lot about a lot of different things. is there anything else that we've talked about or anything that comes up in your mind from our discussion that you would like to share with everybody?
I think part of it is, I think fandom, when you're in it, is such a fun thing. Like it is. It's really exciting. But I think there's a part of just understanding that I think there's a belief that anyone can be a fan, which is true. Anyone can be. But I think there's still a need in so many different ways to try and make it more inclusive, to try and show other people that you can be part of a fan. And again, whether that is through the cost, through accessibility, through clothing, through merchandise, through seeing other people that are around, maybe purposefully inviting people, maybe doing things like what the Rough Riders did last year with their Indigenous jersey and their Indigenous logo, which was fantastic. Like they sold out of it.
Yeah.
It was just kind of thinking differently about who your fandom could look like.
Yeah.
I think even if we're looking at it from a commercial perspective, they will get more people.
Yeah.
And I think it's sort of a crass way of looking at it, but you get more if you are more inclusive. Because people want to be part of this.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It goes right to the point of, if you see it, you can be it.
Yeah.
If you can see yourself in a commercial, at a Rough Rider game, at a Winnipeg Jets game, at a Toronto Maple Leafs game, like you're going to be able to go. If you go, okay, wait, I see someone in a wheelchair that like I can go, or oh my goodness, someone has the same skin color as me and they're going, I can go too. I can make that happen, which is really interesting. And so going forward through that, about thinking about how to think about fans, either that's individually our own fandom or as, companies and marketing and commercialization of what it means to be a fan. Is there anything you could get our viewers to maybe think about the next time they're engaging with their favorite sports teams or with sport?
I think part of it, one of them is just look around. Look around and see whether it's in your bar or whether it's like, you're at a park and you're seeing some of those viewing parties, or you're actually at a stadium or a ballpark. Like, just get a sense of like who's there and maybe get a sense of who do you think is missing.
Yeah.
So whether it is individuals who have a disability, or do you see, and again, some of it's not always seeing, so some of it is hidden, but do you see many LGBTQ families? Do you see Indigenous families? Do you see BIPOC individuals that are there? And kind of understanding that there's a lot of people that want to be part of it, but I think it's the absence of some. So again, whether it's the organizations looking at that or just people looking around, that there can be other people and other ways of inviting people in, that so people can share in part of this, that I think for a lot of people it's so much fun.
Yeah.
So why do we have to limit it? So I think it can be open to more people.
Oh, I love that. And it goes, exactly what you said, which is something that I really like to do is people watch. And so, lots of people tell me that might come off a little bit creepy, but I do like to look around and just take in all the surroundings. So I know that's definitely something that I know I'll be able to do the next time I'm in a sporting environment. And so I think that'll be, and that's something super simple and accessible to anybody who's at any type of sporting event, even if it's like your little siblings or cousins, hockey game or ringette game or whatever it may be. They can just still look around, and even just the behaviors of people too. I think like even behavior of an environment can tell a lot about inclusivity, or if people feel like they belong somewhere as well, whether it's this environment's too aggressive for me. It's definitely something that everybody can do, which is awesome, and I love it. So it's great advice. So that is it for our podcast for episode 1, which is absolutely amazing. I just want to thank you so much for taking the time to be here, and I knew we were going to have a great chat once I asked you to be on here, so I'm super happy you were able to come.
Well, thanks for inviting me. I really loved it. I'm super excited to be part of it and be the first person, and I wish you luck with the rest of the podcast.
Oh, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Well, to all of our listeners, you heard it here first. Dr. Larena Hoeber wants you to look and people watch at your next sports game, okay? And we want to hear about it. So make sure you tell us how it goes. Are there things that you notice? Is it a funny story? It doesn't have to be necessarily about people in the BIPOC community or people with a disability. It could be about a little kid eating an ice cream cone super weirdly. Like, it could be anything. So please let us know, because we'd love to hear it. And yeah, we'll see you next time on Breaking the Ice.